This week started with an in-person debate between two pro-natalists and two anti-natalists. Simone and Malcolm, about whom I have also talked about in the past, were from pronatalist.org, and Lawrence Anton and John Williams joined them to discuss the topic of antinatalism and pronatalism and procreation in general in person. It has to be specially noted that this was an in-person debate between non-philosophers on this topic, which is a rare thing to see. Also, one point to note is that antinatalist community in general can be divided into two sections. One is the philosophers who write on deep topics, on deeper topics, and discuss and debate them with other philosophers. Like David Benetta writes on antinatalism, and then he debates with the likes of Jordan Peterson or Sam Harris, and so on. On the other hand, we have a larger antinatalist community made up of non-philosophers and who are online and just doing memes and a lot of non-civil, if I can call that, now fighting online, which doesn't help the movement in any way. But the projects like these, this in-person debate or the Exploring Antinatalism podcast by Amanda or Voluntary Human Extinction Movement or the Antinatalist Conference, which is coming up, these are the projects which are going to shape the antinatalist activism movement to give some serious form. They are somewhere in the middle, which bring non-philosophers and philosophers together to form some kind of activism so that we can give it some serious form and take it to the mainstream. And from that perspective, this project should be appreciated. It was very good. Talking of John Lawrence and exploring antinatalism, there was a new episode, 80th episode, the Mighty 80, where hosted by Amanda, of course, where John and Lawrence again are talking about speakers of antinatalist conference happening on 2nd and 3rd of December. They talk about what speakers are invited, why they are invited, what topics they're going to talk about, and why they're going to talk about those topics, and so on. Very interesting to listen, interesting episode. Of course, the link will be in the description. And in that episode, it was revealed that Amanda, along with Mati Hairi, who is also going to be one of the speakers in the conference, they both together are writing a book which is on the connection between antinatalism and extinction. And this is absolutely exciting news for somebody like me and of course antinatalist community, wider antinatalist community. Any new book, any new serious book on the topic is welcomed, and especially on the topics like antinatalism and extinction is a very needed book. So, looking forward to read it. There was a paper called A Less Bad Theory of Procreation Asymmetry and the Non-Identity Problem, published by Jonas Aaron. And the paper claims to solve the problem of having a common solution for procreation asymmetry and non-identity problem. What exactly that problem is and how does it do that, I'll be explaining later in the video about it. Now let's talk about the events that happened this week. World Vasectomy Day is celebrated every third Friday of November. So this year it was on 17th of November. It was celebrated in many different countries like Argentina, Mexico, some African countries like Uganda. I'll put the link of World Vasectomy Day page where they have links to live streams in many different countries. There was a 24-hour event on that day by World Vasectomy Day organization. So that was World Vasectomy Day. Now talking about events, there is a Spanish journal called Heneda's Revista. It is on philosophical pessimism, and I'm 100% sure in this section I'm going to mispronounce a lot of names because they are in Spanish. This journal organizes a bi-weekly seminar on the topic. I think what that means is once in 2 weeks seminar on the topic. They have had discussions on topics related to Schopenhauer in the past. Recently, Luis Merida also organized a reading of text by Julio Cabrera. And now on 24th of November, they're going to have a guest presentation. The guest is going to be Miguel Ángel Castro Merino. I'm sorry about saying these names, who is going to talk about his own book. I'll put all the links about the event in the description. So continuing on the events, there is a sixth international conference on philosophy and meaning of life that is going to be happening in June 2024. It's going to be hosted at University of Liverpool from 17th to 19th of June 2024. They are also inviting for papers on the topics. These are the questions they are asking people to address, and then they're saying we also invite proposals for 30-minute on-site presentation on any other questions above and on any other aspects of the topic that you think is important. The deadline for submission is 10th of January 2024. Notifications of acceptance will be sent out by 31st of January 2024. Then there's a list of keynote speakers, and also conference fee is going to be 120 pounds because this is in the UK, for in-person attendance, and 60 pounds for online attendance, and there are some discounts for students as well. That's again happening on 17th to 19th of January. Deadline for abstract submission is 15th of January 2024, and deadline for registration is 31st of May 2024. There is an event in Paris, France, talking about whether overpopulation is a myth or reality. It's happening on 25th of November, coming Saturday, again in Paris. And I think it is based on the topic of myth about overpopulation, on the same topic on which a book is also coming up. The book is loosely translated into English from French, Overpopulation, Myth or Reality, and it is a collaboration of 23 different authors. Dr. Karim Akerma is a very well respected figure in antinatalism and antinatalist community. There was a lecture that he had given, I think, in August 2022, but now we have a video recording of that. It is in German, but we also have English subtitles, and it has been uploaded by Lenny, who I think is now also an active collaborator in Vegan Voidcast. The lecture mainly was around antinatalism in the Judeo-Christian tradition, in Christianity, in Judaism. And apart from Abu al-Mari, I haven't heard much about antinatalism in Islam. And that is also a point Karim Akerma touches on in the lecture. There are other people, other books, other aspects in Islam about antinatalism, which I came to know newly. So, a very good lecture overall. So, we have looked at the events in South America, in Spain, in France, in the UK, and now we have news from Japan. an-japan.org is a website which talks about all the antinatalism activism that is happening in Japan. They do activism including street activism, online activism, and so on. They now also have a donation page, the link of which I'll put in the description. So if you like their work, you can go and donate to them. On the website, thecollector.com, there is a fourth article, I think, by Ryan Sosna on the topic of antinatalism. This time he talks about the consent argument of antinatalism. Now, these articles are not dense philosophical articles, but they are valuable in the sense that if you're not into reading deep philosophy, but you still want to read something meaningful, then articles of these kind bridge the gap between all the big philosophies and philosophers and ordinary people like us who want to get introduced to different aspects and arguments of antinatalism. Okay, so now let's talk about the paper. The paper, again, to recap, is called Less Bad Theory of Procreative Asymmetry and Non-Identity Problem. Before looking into what the problem the paper is claiming to solve, let's understand what that problem is. So we need to understand what procreative asymmetry is, what non-identity problem is, what is the problem between these two problems, and then go towards what paper is saying. Procreative asymmetry is, as the paper presents it, is the asymmetry in the moral duty we have towards procreation. So we have a moral duty not to bring somebody who's going to live a miserable life into existence, which means we have a moral duty not to create miserable lives or prevent miserable lives from coming into existence. But we don't have an equally binding moral duty to create happy lives. That is the asymmetry in of procreation asymmetry in moral duty that the paper talks about. Now, various different people have given different explanations of why this asymmetry exists, even though it makes intuitive sense. One of the explanations which this paper talks about is the complaint gratefulness theory. According to this theory, we have a moral duty to avoid any complaints, but we don't have an equally binding moral duty to promote gratefulness. And so when we bring a miserable life into existence, that person will have a reason to complain against that. So we should avoid that. But if we bring a happy person into existence, even though that person might be grateful to us for bringing them into existence, we don't have a moral duty to promote gratefulness. And therefore, we don't have a moral duty to bring happy person into existence. That is the asymmetry and the explanation for the asymmetry. Now, when we bring this down to the individual level, the paper takes one flavor of non-identity problem. So imagine two scenarios. In one scenario, I can bring a person into existence who's going to have 30 years of happy life. And then after that, maybe not so happy life. Let's call this 30-year person. In another scenario, I can bring a different non-identical person who's going to live 70 years of happy life. Let's call this 70-year person. So it makes intuitive sense to not bring 30-year person, but the 70-year person. Because we can say that 30-year person is having less happy life. He might complain that, why am I having less happy life? So on that complaint gratefulness theory, this might make sense. But the problem with that is that the 30-year person only had two options. One, to not come into existence, or to come into existence with a 30-year happy life. That's all. He did not have an option of having 70 year. So once we bring him into existence, it doesn't make sense for him to complain about the 30 years of happy life. In fact, he should be grateful that he has got 30 years of happy life, is what some philosophers are saying. And therefore, we cannot use the same explanation for procreative asymmetry to explain this problem, which the paper calls as non-identity problem. Now, what are the solutions to this non-identity problem then? What are the solutions to select 70-year person over 30-year person? You can take utilitarianism, that we have a duty to increase happiness, to maximize, maximize pleasure, and therefore we can select 70-year-old person, 70-year person. The problem with that is then it defeats procreative asymmetry, because then we have a moral duty to bring happy lives. So the paper says that we can have solutions to one of these things, procreative asymmetry and non-identity problem, but we cannot have a solution which solves both of these problems. And then the paper says that this less bad theory is actually provides solution to both of these problems together. How it does that? Before looking into that, we need to understand a concept of what they say as a misfortune. So imagine that a boy dies when he's 14 years old. We would regret that for many things, but one of the things we would regret that would be that that boy could have lived for 70, 80 years like the average human life, could have enjoyed all that well-being. That potential well-being was not realized. That is called in this paper as a misfortune. That bad, the potential bad which happened, or potential good which was missed, is called a misfortune. Now compare this to a 14-year-old dog which dies, assuming that an average age of dog may be 40, and the dog dies at 14 years. Now we might regret that dog dying for many reasons, but in those reasons would not be a reason of this misfortune, of this potential good which is missed, because dogs don't on an average live to 70, 80 years. They only live to 14, 15, maybe 20 years, and therefore we don't have that regret when the dog dies. So this potential, unrealized potential, is a misfortune. It doesn't have to be in life expectancy, it can be in cognitive ability. So imagine that a human is cognitively impaired to a degree where their cognitive ability is only as same as a dog. We would regret that that human would not be able to enjoy the things that normal humans enjoy, which require some intelligence, like music or comedy or literature, the art or anything of that. They might not be able to enjoy because they don't have cognitive ability. They only have at the level of the dog. So that's a misfortune we would regret. We don't regret that in case of normal dogs, because average dogs don't have that capability anyway. There's no potential which is missed there. That is the misfortune we are talking about. So the paper says that uh, it is bad if such a misfortune occurs. And then the paper says that the fundamental asymmetry on which our procreative asymmetry and non-identity problems and the intuitions behind them are situated on are the asymmetry that we have a moral duty to avoid bad, but we don't have an equally binding moral duty to produce or provide good. And if we include that missed or that misfortune in the bad, if we include that as one of the bads that can happen to somebody, then it says that it explains procreative asymmetry as well as non-identity problem. So, in case of non-identity problem, we can say that by bringing the 30-year person instead of bringing 70-year person, we are missing that how much 40 years of potential well-being of somebody. It's a different person, but we are missing that potential well-being. That well-being is lost, and that is why it is bad to bring 30-year person instead of 70-year person. We can also explain why we have a duty to avoid bringing miserable lives into existence, but not a moral duty to bring happy people into existence. Because if we bring miserable lives into existence, we'll be missing or we'll be creating that misfortune in their case. This is what the paper claims. It also claims that it is not implying antinatalism. So it is not taking into consideration the option of not bringing someone into existence at all. In case of non-identity, they have provided only two options. You either bring 30-year person or 70-year person. There's no option of not bringing any of them. That is the claim that the paper says, and therefore they say that this is not implying antinatalism. I am not completely satisfied with this paper for many reasons, but I'll just state a few to highlight. One is, if you are basing your theory on the fundamental asymmetry that we have a moral duty to avoid bad but no moral duty to produce good, then you are still saying the same thing. I don't think it solves anything or it brings anything new to the table. That's one. The second is that why are we excluding the option of not bringing somebody into existence just to avoid implying antinatalism? What prevents us doing that? I don't really understand. Those are the two things. I'm not satisfied with this. So the paper starts with high promises, high claims, very attractive abstract, and then when you read through it, it sort of gets disappointing. That's what I thought. Anyway, those were the stories that I noticed during this week. If I've missed any, please let me know. Thank you.